bring up here, his name is Joe Newton. I've really been looking forward to him coming to speak to us. I've got his resume out here. It's unbelievable. I mean, maybe it's not even true. I don't know. It's unbelievable. Look, Appalachian State University, bachelor's business administration in business economics, political science. John Marshall Law School, graduated summa cum laude, highest academic average in the history of John Marshall Law School. President of the Student Bar in 1992. Atlanta Law School, Masters of Litigation. Gwinnett Technical College, numerous math courses, as well as his heating and air curriculum. He has a license in plumbing, heating and air, electrical, real estate, general contracting. Do you sleep? But here recently, and I really admire the people that come in here and speak to us, because they have locked on to an issue that's very vitally important for people to understand. And they spend the time, like Lee Hawkins, they spend the time to learn as much as they possibly can so that they can come in here and inform us about these issues. And this has been an issue that's been on our plate for quite a while, and I'm so glad that we'll be able to get Joe to come in and speak to us about it tonight. Joe Newton is going to talk to us about refugee resettlement and tell us what the whole story is about that, and I hope he'll come on up here and give him a good round of applause.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being invited to this particular Tea Party group, because I sincerely believe that this county has more political leverage than any county in the state, but it's not being used. I would like to get this Tea Party and different organizations in this county united behind stopping refugee resettlement. You have a governor who lives here, a lieutenant governor who lives here. Lee and all his pals in the legislature live here, solid Republicans. You got the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, the next county over. You have everything you need to stop refugee resettlement in this county. And if you stop this, you'll go a long ways towards stopping a lot of other issues. But unfortunately, the Tea Party chases rabbits all the time. They chase gun rights, they chase the Bible, they chase Bible in the schools, back and forth, one issue right after another. D.A. King has said that your Tea Parties are a mile wide but an inch deep. I believe that. But I think I have the issue that you can unite behind. Because if you don't win on this issue, you're going to lose on all the others. This is the ultimate issue, the only one that really matters in this country, because this goes to the issue of taxes, Bibles, homeland defense, the whole 9 yards. So let's get started. Now you've heard, I want to get some guys to pass out, I got quite a bit of printed material. There are 3 different packages there. If you guys will start passing that out, we can get started. Carol, let me answer your question regarding the schools. DeKalb County has 5 meals extra. There are five school systems in the state that have 5 meals above what everybody else has. Everybody else is capped at 20 meals. Gwinnett is bumping up against that cap right now. DeKalb is a spendthrift county, and they're bumping up against the additional 5 meals. In fact, they just passed a splosh tax, educational splosh. So these school administrators are quietly discussing raising that millage cap on your schools. Okay, that's coming. And refugee resettlement is a big reason it's coming, a huge reason. Okay, so we're going to go into that. Refugee resettlement is just eating up money like it's going out of style. And I'm going to show you why. Now, refugee resettlement is governed by the, let me give you a little background first before we get in there, while we're passing out. The first misconception is that refugee resettlement is about being kind to people. It's about taking care of people who are in danger overseas. People who have a good faith belief that they're being persecuted morally, physically, emotionally, religious, sexually, and so on and so forth. There's a long laundry list of these people, including people who can only have one child in China. They've been added to that list of people who qualify for refugee resettlement because they've been persecuted by not allowing to have more than one child. Gay and lesbian activities have been added to the list. There are 21 countries that criminalize gay and lesbian activities. So they're all part of the list. They're considered to be persecuted and have a good faith. They have a good faith reason to feel that they are in harm, danger, and so on and so forth. And pretty soon they'll be starting to add, well, I don't think they'll add Cherokee County because they don't like you, but they'll find some other little nitpicky reason to add some other group. It's all part of the Democratic Party's agenda. So let me tell you, these people that are coming in here are not in harm's way. They're not. These people have been sitting in refugee camps overseas that are funded by you, the United States government. They're being fed with American agriculture. They have been treated with American medical aid, and they have American-style sanitation facilities. The contractors have whined that the conditions are filthy. Well, they use porta-johns, and if you don't clean up the porta-john, it's filthy. But they're required to do a little something during the day, and one of their requirements is they clean up the porta-johns. But these refugee resettlement contractors would have you believe that these people are living in filthy conditions. Well, this is a vast improvement to what they've had in life, because these 10 Middle Eastern countries these people are coming from are used to doing their business in the desert and covered up with sand so the flies don't follow them around. Okay, that's the way they live. They've lived that way for over 2,000 years. So what they have in these refugee camps is a pretty nice lifestyle. But the refugee resettlement contractors would have you believe that these are awful conditions. Well, don't believe that nonsense. Just don't believe it. The refugee resettlement contractors are talking about how hot it is and uncomfortable over there. Well, it is for American do-gooders who go over there, but it's not for these natives. They're used to this climate. They've lived that way for centuries. So stop listening to their whining. But these people, the truth is just not in these people at all. Now then, if refugee resettlement is not about helping people, what is it about? It's about money. This is a money-making operation. It is a huge revenue generator. It's a $20 billion a year business. $20 billion a year for this. And at all levels, state, federal, and local. Well, the $20 billion doesn't count your schools. That's all extra. You pay for that on your own. Okay, so there's no extra money put in your school budget for refugees. Let me get that out in the beginning. Refugee contractors and advocates tell you that the schooling of these children are paid for by the federal government. I've interviewed school superintendents and their officials in Gwinnett, DeKalb, Fulton County, White County, and day before yesterday, Hall County, and none of them tell me that there are any extra funds put in their budget for refugees. So don't listen to that nonsense. That's another fairy tale they're telling you. The truth is just not in these people. Now, they've convinced our legislators who, and our governor and the governor's staff, who none of them seem to be able to read, that we can't get out of the refugee resettlement program. That it's the federal government controls this. So what I've done is I've brought an excerpt from the refugee resettlement statute. Now this statute was passed in 1980 by that wonderful president, Jimmy Carter. I know you all love Jimmy. Okay, this is the man who gave you this. And every president since then has lived by this and encouraged it. Now what happened back then, shortly after Jimmy passed this statute, Alec Greenspan started talking about how there is a hole in our population, a gap, a void, when the baby boomers start retiring. And he reasoned that Mr. Greenspan reasoned, the Federal Reserve Chairman at the time, that that was caused by 50,000 men being killed in Vietnam, by the Supreme Court allowing abortion, and by women electing to have fewer children. Whatever the rationale is, that sounds pretty good, and it's probably pretty factual. So when the first group of baby boomers started retiring, he said that the economy, the gross domestic product, would shrink by 2 to 3%, and that or more each year. And so this scared the military, and the military started getting behind this. Well, then all the other government agencies started thinking about this. What happens to my budget if it drops 2 to 3% a year? What are we going to do? We're going to let people go. So Greenspan said the way to resolve this would be to let in 10 million immigrants within 10 years, and that would fill up the hole, and we could go right on. We wouldn't notice the fact the baby boomers retiring. Okay, that sounded pretty good. So they started doing that. Every president started letting refugees come in. They started loosening up the border. They stopped enforcing illegal immigration, and the population started filling up. And for a while we liked it because we were getting a lot of work done with the illegal immigrants. Nobody seemed to care. Well, at some point in time, it started dragging down the wage rate. Well, that was the second prong of this, because the Chamber of Commerce got behind this because they wanted to increase their markets, their total market. They weren't concerned with just filling up the hole. They wanted to go way on beyond that, and that's what we've done. So the Chamber of Commerce, American Association of Manufacturers, the meat processing industry, everybody all the way down the line got behind this, and we've gone way above 10 million immigrants. How far above that, I don't know. But the point is that the purpose of it now is to enlarge the market and drive down the wage rate. And as a result of that, we're destroying the middle class. For instance, you have 51,000 workers over in these chicken plants. They're paying these workers about $10 an hour below what it would cost to hire an American. That's 50,000 times $10 an hour. What's that, $500,000 an hour they're sticking in their pockets? $5 million in 10 hours? $20 million in a week, in a 40-hour week? You see how much it's saving them? Now they say, well, the price of food will go up. Chickens will go up $1 a pound. Wow, $2 a pound. So what? You're driving Americans to the poorhouse. You're killing the wage rate. And they say, well, and then after a while, these refugees who are getting American welfare decide they want to become Americans and not work, go on welfare. So they bring in more immigrants. Those people catch on to what the American system. They decide they want to work. Then there are more immigrants. And this vicious cycle, as it continues on, is going to break this country. And it's going to break you before it breaks anybody else, because you're going to pay for it. So keep that in mind while we're talking about this, what this cycle is all about. It's not about helping people. It's about the money. That's all it's ever been about since Jimmy Carter passed his statute. At one time, this was about helping people overseas. But we took the money out of the overseas relief effort and put it in the refugee resettlement program and started hiring these greedy contractors to bring refugees over here. And we could take care of 500 people overseas for what it costs us to bring one refugee over here for 1 year. Keep that in mind. We created this worldwide refugee crisis, we, the United States, because we elected under George Bush's points of 1,000-point light program, we elected to let these charities be hired by the government to handle this refugee resettlement program and a lot of other programs. And you all know who Cheryl Nunn is. Well, that's what Cheryl Nunn has done all her life. Jump on that 1,000-point light program. And she's moved that operation to Atlanta, and she intends to make this the focal point of refugee resettlement and all these other charitable activities for the southeastern United States. Keep that in mind about what's going on. Now, big companies are behind this. Delta, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, you know the list. Delta is marketing this overseas as a way to sell airline tickets. Coke, you remember that song they had with all the performers in it? What was the name of that hymn? Yeah. They used that overseas to promote refugee resettlement. See, all this is a marketing program to sell their products overseas. Of course, it's at your expense. So let's keep all that in mind when we're talking about this nonsense. All right, the Refugee Resettlement Act, the first page, mine's in blue, yours is in black. It says Office of Refugee Resettlement. The statute says, and I point this out to you because I want you to understand that this program is voluntary. The states volunteered to enter the program. The states have voluntarily stayed in the program, and the states can voluntarily get out of the program anytime they want to. Because this thing is set up where the federal government gives Georgia $9 million a year. You paying attention, Lee? I talked to you about this before, and that somehow you've forgotten it. Okay? 2.5 years ago, I talked to you about this. Remember, at the picnic?
Yep.
Okay. And then down in your office?
Yep.
All right, all right. So we're on the same page, right?
Right.
Okay. All right, now, they give us $9 million a year. We don't have to take the $9 million. We can refuse it. Or we can take $8 million, or 7, or 6, or 5, some portion of that. Okay? Remember when the governor said 3 years ago, I'm cutting back on the number of refugees. I wrote the HEW and I told them I don't want any more refugees. Well, they cut back on about 2%. But at the same time, they raised the budget $1.1 million for the Refugee Resettlement Program. What was the $1.1 million for? It was to pay their staff higher salaries. A state director in a refugee resettlement programs typically make $400,000 a year. David Milbank was the foreign secretary of Great Britain 2 years ago. They had a political change over there. Miliband found himself without a job. Hillary Clinton made the announcement in San Diego, California 2 years ago that Miliband was going to be hired as chairman of one of the refugee resettlement programs at $500,000 a year. That's your tax money. Okay, that's what's really going on. Now, the Refugee Resettlement Act says that in the first paragraph, no grant or contract. When the $9 million comes into Georgia, of course, Georgia had to have a state, according to the terms of the statute, if we were going to participate in this program, which we elected to do. We had to hire a state refugee resettlement director. So when we say the director, we're talking about the director in Washington has authorized our state director to do certain things. Part of it, the federal government director does, part of it, the state director does. So it says no grant or contract. A grant is something that you apply for, okay? A contract is something you sign as a result of your application of the grant. If you don't want to do it, don't apply for the grant. It's real simple. If you don't want the money in Georgia, don't take the money or take less money. It's up to you, the General Assembly, you, Governor Deal, you, Casey Cagle, you, members of the legislature. If you don't want to play this game, then don't play it. You can stop refugee resettlement today if you had the political will in Georgia. Now, everybody got all excited over the Syrians. Well, let me tell you about the Syrians. The Syrians have been here since at least 2011. They're nothing new. And my position on this hadn't changed one iota when the governor came out with his executive order saying we don't want the Syrians. We're not going to let state agencies serve the Syrians. Nothing has changed. Remember the Sanar brothers? The Boston Marathon bombers? They were Chechnyan rebels, Muslims from the Chechnyan section of Russia. They have been a pain in the neck to Vladimir Putin. Putin told us, don't take these people, they're dangerous. We ignored that. We brought them over here, and you see what happened in the Boston Marathon bombing. Well, let me give you a little history on those Muslim.
Or the Fort Hood, Texas shooting.
Pardon me?
Or the Fort, no, he wasn't an immigrant.
No, he was another one.
Yeah.
That's another guy, the Fort Hood shooter. Okay, the Chechen rebels are the same ones that blew up the subway in Moscow. They're the same people that took over the opera house after that. And the Russian troops had to storm the opera house. They killed about a dozen people. They've been pulling stuff like that in Russia for decades. They want to secede from Russia. Putin can't stand these people. That's a big reason Putin is in Syria, that in the pipeline. But he absolutely detests these people. So he told us not to bring them, but our refugee resettlement contractors brought them over here. Remember how they went back and forth? They weren't asylees. That's nonsense. If you're an asylee and you're fleeing persecution, you don't get on a plane and go back over there time after time. The whole family was cared for and provided for by the refugee resettlement program. The refugee resettlement contractors vigorously denied this, essentially called me a liar when I spoke in front of the General Assembly. The legislators treated me like I was a nut. What are you doing, Newton? Come in here and saying that thing. When these nice refugee resettlement contractors have come in here all these years, we've been giving them money. What a wonderful group of people they are. Are you crazy?
Excuse me, sir.
That's the way they
What
treat
General
me.
Assembly did you speak to?
The Georgia General Assembly,
Okay.
2 years ago, in front of Katie Dempsey's committee. She's over here in Rome. Katie is a professional volunteer. That's her occupation. She's been a professional volunteer all her life. She's essentially a left-wing extremist.
I have the same experience too with him.
Good. Now and her counterpart in the Senate is Renee Underwood, who talks a real good conservative game, but she's the one who funds refugee resettlement in the Senate. Okay, and she's convinced all these good people like Lee that this is a wonderful program. Okay, it's a good idea. But this program is all voluntary. It's all based on grants and contracts. And then in all caps, we got refugee resettlement and assistance to refugees.
As long as your name and names, doesn't Renee Unterman get a kickback on this?
Exactly. She works for AmeriGroup. AmeriGroup sells Peach Care Insurance. Peach Care Insurance is part of the refugee resettlement program.
So she's doing this for money?
I've known Ray a long time. Well, since you brought it up, I used to date Renee. Okay? I was down there the year they hired her. I know who her boss is and who her boss's boss is, and I know how she voted. Isn't that right, Lee? Huh?
I guess, I don't know.
You were down there. What do you mean you don't know? What do you don't mean you don't know? You've asked me about it a number of times.
Not you dating her, I
No, these memories all of a sudden get foggy here. He can't remember a lot of things he doesn't want to remember. But anyway, I was down there when they hired her. Okay? I know this from firsthand experience. I don't need to go any further than that, but
Joe, I got a question. How many are we looking at coming in per year? How many?
Georgia has brought in an average of 3,000 a year since 1980, 35 years. We're going into our 36th year.
Okay, and a lot of them are located around Clarkston, correct?
Clarkston has been the center point of this, but they filled up every end of DeKalb County. They have offices in Lawrenceville now. They're over in Cobb County. The big group of them down in Clayton County. Fulton takes a certain number of them. They're spreading out everywhere.
Well, in terms of jobs, I can see them coming up here and being a part of the poultry industry. Is that?
In 2008, 9, 10, and 10, the refugee contractors thanked the poultry industry because they were the primary employers of refugees. Now, the way this hustle works is, if the refugee works 90 days, then the refugee resettlement contractor gets paid. Then they dump the refugee on the public welfare system and run to the airport and get another group.
Oh, boy.
Okay? That's the way the deal works. And what they do when they bring them over here, they take their passports away, they put them in some dumpy apartment, like that mess you're talking about down in Clarkston now. They don't feed them for a couple of days, so the refugee understands who's in charge. And then they give them some rudimentary English lessons, left, right, up and down, things like that. And then they load them up in a van, they bring them up here and put them in a chicken plant, and they verbally abuse them, and they do everything they can do to keep them to work 90 days.
That's human trafficking is what.
After 90 days, the heck with them.
That's human trafficking.
They don't even know where these people live within 4 months. They could care less because they're back to the airport getting another group. Okay, there's no money to be made taking care of a refugee 91 days.
Did you call this the importing of slaves?
I would call it, no.
It's human trafficking. Is what
No,
it
it's
is.
not. These people, listen, there is no means testing for refugees.
No,
So-
I'm saying the import of slaves.
No,
Slave
no.
workers, I mean,
No,
they're
it's-
being used as slaves.
No.
Treated horribly.
No. They're treated pretty rough for 90 days to keep them working in the plants. On the 91st day, they could care less. They get it pretty, life is good after 90 days. There's no means testing these people. A lot of these people come over here with money in their pocket, they start businesses that compete against Americans. And of course, they get subsidized loans from the government to do that.
Are these people mostly out of Africa that you're talking about?
No, they're from the last several years have been from 10 Middle Eastern countries, starting with Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, all the way through the Arabian Peninsula, down the northeast coast of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia. We're going to get a huge number from Eritrea. They're coming in through South Sudan. They're lovely people. You know about the South Sudan folks and how they kidnap the girls from the camp. Yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun. You think the Syrians are bad? Where do you get to know the Eritreans? And you already know about the Somalians.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Black Hawk Down.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned a while ago that Jimmy Carter established this by statute, did he go through Congress? Or
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When Carter got in, let's see.
Because
Nixon was president. Nixon resigned. Ford was the temporary president, and the country was thoroughly irritated with Republicans. Okay, so there by a landslide, Jimmy Carter gets in. He gets a Democrat Congress, and the first 4 years, the first 2 years anyway, he passes stuff like this, and we've been stuck with it ever since then.
as I've read, the Office of Refugee Resettlement is under the Department of Health and Human Services,
Yes.
which is in the executive branch. But you know, the Congress has authority over immigration.
Well, Congress.
So if the Congress wanted to stop this, they could.
Well, the Congress just last month raised the quota from 70,000 refugees to 80,000. Just last month. So it's not happening. Of course, now things
And
happen.
Congress is now Republican.
Yeah, it's Republican. Both parties have done this. Now all of a sudden we got this thing going on in France. Everybody's getting all excited because the public now is watching very carefully. So they're all scurrying around trying to come up with a new statute up there. I hope it passes, but I think Obama's going to veto it. It passed the House by 289 votes, I think, which is enough for an override a veto, but don't expect that to happen in the Senate.
Harry Reid said he would stop it.
Yeah,
Harry Reid said it wouldn't even, he wouldn't even let it.
right. Well, let's get on through some of this material, and I do want to answer your questions, but let's keep them short because we got a lot to cover. You got to submit a plan to the director. The state of Georgia has to submit that plan to the director. Wait a minute, Lee. Now, come on. Don't run away.
Take my sister home.
All right.
About 15, I'm
All
a
right.
school teacher.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lee. You've been a good sport, buddy. Hey, Lee, now listen, we've been friends a long time, haven't we?
That's right.
And I've funded your campaigns, right?
I don't know if
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. Well, I've got the canceled check if you need to see it.
I didn't tell you David Renee the other minute, and I wasn't in the committee with Katie Dempsey.
All right.
But anyway, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lee. The state has got to submit a plan. That's the state of Georgia on how they intend, in subparagraph I, how they intend to encourage effective refugee resettlement and economic self-sufficiency. When I testified in front of the General Assembly 2 years ago, or 2 years ago, I showed them a national chart where refugees weren't but 30% of them actually working. Okay? Within 2 months, they republished their data, and all of a sudden, 80% of them were working. Amazing recovery. Well, what they did, they used a unique definition called economic self-sufficiency. We think that's no assistance from the government. Economic self-sufficiency under the Refugee Resettlement Act means they can take the benefit of 16 welfare programs and work part-time, still considered to be economically self-sufficient.
Change the definition.
Exactly. And that's how they went from 30% employment to 80% in 2 months. I'm not saying it was just because I testified, but they had the tape, they had the video,
Probably was.
and they knew what the argument was going to be and what I was telling the General Assembly, and they were frantic. They essentially just treated me like I was an idiot. And unfortunately, the legislators bought it. I wonder what they're buying now. I wonder what their explanation is now. And then the state's got to ensure language training. Well, that's only minimal. Like I said, none of that's going to secondary and elementary and the high schools. Refugee includes, under number 10 there, virtually anybody under the sun. Every conceivable type of entry that you can get into this country can be classified as a refugee. Virtually any alien. Okay? Assistance to refugee children. No, the second paragraph from the bottom, number 1 there. The Secretary is authorized to make grants, and from the second line from the bottom, to refugee children in elementary and secondary education. That's not happening. Your local school system is paying for that. Okay? Now, when they say unaccompanied children in the last paragraph, essentially, unaccompanied children, in the common definition of it, you look at the children at the border. All those were classified as unaccompanied children. So that 1.1 million that the legislature added to the budget the year the governor said he wasn't going to take any more refugees, they were using that money to fund the unaccompanied children at the border program. They knew it was coming. They didn't tell the governor it was coming. They didn't tell anybody else. But they knew they were coming. The Catholic churches had been down there building this up, and that was when their big push started. These children had been coming for years. We just found out about it when it hit the news. So under that provision of the statute, these children are essentially become a ward of the state, and they're taken care of just like any other child that's a ward of the state until age 18. So the ones who stayed here,
How did they get here as unaccompanied children?
well, they rode trains. They got on the train, got on top of boxcars. They hired parents hired private carriers. Some of them hired coyotes. Some of them are like my maid. She walked across the border 15 years ago, 16 years ago. It's not hard to get across the American border. She was telling me it's only about knee deep at the deepest sometimes a year. So she just walked across.
So when you're talking about unaccompanied children, you mean minors that are probably 12 to 18?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
But they tell you that they're minors. Good many of them are in their 20s. Okay? It's another way of beating the system. At any rate, we go on through the statute. That's the high points. I've got on my website, you can access the federal statute, and you can go through this thing. I hope you will. The more you read, the more nauseated you'll get about how much money is just pouring out on this. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I may be jumping ahead, but I was just going to go back to the question that you asked. You mentioned the point you made earlier about we've got the Republican conservative muscle in this county, but yet there's not enough of a pushback on lessening the refugees coming into Georgia. It's clear why the Democrats are doing that, and somewhat clear why the establishment on the GOP side is doing it. But why do you think at the bottom of, at the end of the day, why they're not pushing back on it?
Well, I hope it's not going to offend anybody. Those chicken plants over there are a big reason. Okay, This agricultural visa nonsense, you've been hearing about it from farmers whining about we don't have enough agricultural visas, we can't find anybody to bring this crop in down here in South Georgia.
That's called the H-2A program.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was selling farm equipment in 1970 in eastern North Carolina, tobacco curing equipment. They were whining then about that. They just didn't want to pay a fair wage. And welfare benefits have got so high, the blacks said, why should we work? We can get more welfare. You see what I mean? But the agricultural visas are not confined to just farmers. The agricultural visas are for agribusiness. So that's why you've got all these chicken workers up here, chicken plant workers, here and all over the country. The meat packing industry thrives on illegal immigration and refugee resettlement. They're building whole towns for refugees out in the Midwest. Tyson Foods is a huge employer of refugees and illegal immigrants.
I practiced law for 40 years. I have a specialty in agricultural law. And I have one observation to make, a postgraduate degree in ag law. If there was a federal law passed that requires that full medical health insurance be provided by an employer for any employee that is hired and for any dependents that are in this country, this will resolve much of what you're talking about. It's that simple.
That, the pay increase.
It will take care of it in that. It'll put it
Right.
to about a $15 to $17 an hour work schedule.
Right. Well, at any rate, they're the biggest beneficiaries, manufacturing plants in America. Again, this is the Chamber of Commerce agenda. Drive down the wage rate, enlarge the market. Now let's see, we haven't talked too much about, you don't hear anything, in fact, about how refugee resettlement really affects your pocketbook at the local level. I want to congratulate Lee Lovett with the Deputy Superintendent of Hall County. He's the first superintendent employee or superintendent who's actually cooperated with me in getting this data, and I'm talking about a half a dozen or more of them I've talked to. Your general fund in this county is $241 million. Okay, you have 27,030 students in your system. That works out to about $7,500 per child. And here's the way it breaks down. It's local and state taxes put together. It costs you around $7,406 per child. Round figure $7,500. A typical refugee family has 4 children. That's what, $30,000 a year, right? A Muslim family has 8 children. That's $60,000 a year, just for those children each year. That's what it's costing your school systems. In DeKalb County, a few years ago, there was an AJC article here, I can't find it right this minute, said they were teaching children who spoke 126 languages and dialects, their parents. 2 years ago, the DeKalb County lobbyist on the Jeff Dickerson on the Georgia gang said that they were teaching school in over 150 languages. He recently said now they're teaching school in over 200 languages. That's not sustainable. Even with the 5 meals extra they get. They passed an E-Splosh this year. That school system is going to collapse. That county is headed for Detroit-style bankruptcy. It's out of control. They're bringing that into Gwinnett as fast as they can. That's why one reason I got involved in this, because they're ruining Gwinnett. Everything, all this stuff in DeKalb spills over into Gwinnett, which eventually is going to spill over into Hall and all of northeast Georgia. Now these refugee contractors determine what communities they're going to go to. And they get the cooperation of local officials, and they have these secret meetings with these local officials, and they work out a plan, and they start welcoming these people in here. This little left-wing mayor up in Athens, Georgia, y'all are familiar with her? She just agreed to accept 350 more refugees in Athens. They're picking the community. I hear these guys say, oh, I live up here in Jones Creek, they ain't coming up here around me. I'm way away from Atlanta's problems. Buddy, you're gonna have a surprise. Because if your town or county takes any federal money, they can place them in your community, and they'll loan them. If they want to buy a house, they'll give them a below market interest rate loan, and these charities will pay the down payment, and they're going to be living next to you. Don't think you're going to get away from this. The guy said, well, I live up here in the mountains. They ain't coming up here. Well, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are, because when these charities pick out a community, they saturate that community. They keep it on, they keep it up, and the only way you get it stopped is people start screaming bloody murder. That's the only way it ever stops. And then it's just moderated. It keeps on. Yeah.
Do you know what's in it for the mayor of Athens to accept those?
I don't know. I just assume she's just a leftist. I have no idea what's motivating her. So I don't understand leftists.
Campaign contributions, I'm sure.
There's
Campaign
always
contributions
money
is
in
a
it somewhere.
one big factor.
There's always money in it somewhere.
Yeah, there's money
There's
somewhere.
always money.
Joe, do you know who the contractors are, the list of contractors?
Well, the largest one in the country for a long time was the Catholic bishops. And they say they don't have anything to do with the Catholic Church. That's their story, and they're sticking with it.
Well, who's operating in Georgia, pretty much?
There are about 4 of them. Georgia Catholic Charities is the largest. World Relief is the largest. Another one. The Episcopal group is here. HIAS is the Hebrew Immigration Assistance group. They will take 1,000 Muslims just to get 1 Jew out of a country. I mean, they don't care anything about anything except getting that 1 Jew out of that country.
And they're making thousands
Yeah.
of that too.
Yeah.
I think we're sold on as a problem. What is the solution? What can we as a group do to create an environment here in Hall County or North Georgia or whatever? What is the game plan to rid ourselves of this problem?
Well, you're not going to rid yourself of the problem, but what you can do is you can talk to your state delegation and convince them to cut the budget. If you cut the budget, say you cut it in half, you're going to cripple the refugee resettlement program. And a lot of the contractors are going to move on because they're not going to stay unless they make a profit. They say they're nonprofits, but there's a huge amount of profit in this, and it's hidden in salaries. So if you cut the budget, you limit the number of refugees that come in here. I don't care what the federal government tells you. The whole thing is based on money. It's money driven. If we took 4.5 million rather than 9 million, this thing would die out, and a lot of these refugees would move. How do I know that? The governor told me that. Okay, 3 years ago, I met him in his office, and he told me that that's how they did it in Terre Haute, Indiana. That's how they got rid of the Somalians. They moved over to the Twin Cities area of Minnesota. That's why Minnesota is inundated with Somalians. That's why they're having all these gang wars, and the police are it's driving them crazy up there. Cutting the money back is the key to the whole thing. You can't tell them that they're prohibited from coming to Georgia, because these people have the right to travel just like anybody else. They become permanent residents within a year, and then they're on the fast track for citizenship within 5 years. So,
Can you give us the template of a notification, and it could be letter form or whatever, so that people have the information that they need to include in a document or to be able to speak to them fluently over the phone, so that they can convey what it is that they need to convey to their representatives?
sure, just cut the budget.
Well, I know.
Cut, don't take the 9 million. 4.5 is the goal I'm shooting for. Senator McCoon wants to cut it all together. He wants to prohibit the state from taking any federal money on this by statute. Now, the problem with cutting it out altogether is there's another program called the Wilson Fish Act, where a state refuses to participate, the federal government will do it directly. That's the mess that Tennessee and Alabama's in. So if you cut it out completely, they'll come in and run the program. But we can cut it down substantially and still be qualified as operators of the program. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to commit suicide. I'm just trying to cripple this program so these people will move. So it will slow this down. Hopefully we'll get a Republican president, or we'll get this statute through where you can't bring these people anymore. That's the intent of this thing they voted on today.
Okay.
It appears to be, yeah.
It would appear to me that a spotlight on this whole thing needs to be done, and the best way I know to do that, because all this is really on everybody's mind now, is 60 minutes.
Hopefully somebody like that will do a program on that. Meanwhile, I'm running around the state and I'm trying to tell people what's going on. Don't believe all this spin and all this whining. It's just not true. This whole thing is money driven.
You are
And that's why I go
appreciated.
back to,
Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, that's why I go back to that question earlier, is with the political muscle we have in Hall County, you know, we've all called our, you know, legislatures and, you know, congressmen, so on and so forth, and we've emailed, we've done all of those things that all of us constantly do, but there's nothing tangible that seems to come from that in the end. So,
Right.
what does it take to get something tangible, some traction,
Okay.
that actually moves the meter and
All right. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing my best to beat Fran Miller in Dunwoody. He's the guy who gets the targeted assistance grants for DeKalb County. I found a candidate who actually put no more refugees on his campaign literature. Nobody else in Georgia that I know has ever done this.
Is this Paul
this guy,
Maynard?
this guy, huh? That's
That-
Paul Maynard.
Paul Maynard here?
He's actually put it on his campaign literature, no more refugees. I want you to stop by and talk to Paul and give him $1, $5, $10, $20, whatever you can. He is the poster boy for what we need in the legislature. Somebody like him. And up here in Hall County, I want you to pick one legislator that you want to beat. Get you a candidate and stop arguing about all these issues. Get together and beat that one candidate on the issue of refugee resettlement. That's how you get the attention of the legislature. That news travels fast that so-and-so got beat on the issue of refugee resettlement. The iron is hot right now. You've got to strike. Find one guy. All he needs is a pulse. Okay? And elect him on the
$400.
issue of refugee resettlement.
You're very entertaining, Joe.
Well, that's the truth. I mean, you've got to find, it doesn't work if you don't have a candidate. I've got Paul Maynard. I know what Paul's gonna do.
These are immediate answers. I wonder how many of you have considered this. I'm very ardently pro-life, and the number of abortions in this country almost directly correlates to the number of immigrants, illegal immigrants in the country. The number is almost exactly the same. For years and years and years, we have aborted our children, and what has it got us? We're being overtaken by foreign enemies. In order to keep the economy from contracting, so you and I at our age, we're the baby boomers, can continue to live in bliss until we die and phase out. And then, what we have left our children.
That's a big factor. That's a big factor. But you gotta elect people like Maynard. Because Maynard, he's the only person in Georgia I've ever seen that actually had the guts to put this on his campaign literature. I hope you'll give him some money when you go by. Just give him anything, 5, 10, 20 bucks or more if you can. But he's the kind of man we need down there. And you need to find one guy here in Hall County. I thought Mike would be a good candidate, but Mike said he wouldn't mind campaigning, he just doesn't want to go down there. I can understand that. But you gotta find somebody.
I got a $20 bill for Paul Maynard tonight. Y'all give this guy some money.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
That I want to ask.
Yes, sir.
Take away the money, take away all the other stuff, but let me ask you this. For those people that are Christians that are being killed and persecuted, that truly need protection, what is your answer to that situation?
The refugee camps overseas,
Yep.
these people are protected. The problem with the Christians is the refugee camps overseas are dominated by Muslims. That's where Christians are being discriminated against. they're reluctant to go into the refugee camps. We're paying for the refugee camps. And the money was taken out of the refugee resettlement programs overseas, and that's what caused this huge migration. If we put the money back overseas where it was in the beginning, we take care of these people, and they can repatriate back in their own country. And we can slowly get the Christians out. We're not going to be able to save all those Christians. We can try. But right now, Obama's got this thing, and this thing is run by the UN High Commission on Refugees, which is dominated by Muslims. That's the politics of the UN. And they're picking 95% of the people that are coming over here. And there's so much graft and payoff that if you got some money, you can move to the head of the list and come over here, because there's no means testing to this program. You can come over here with $1 million in your pocket and get on all these welfare programs. The whole thing is just corrupt. It's like every other government contracting program. It's jumped off the rails, and you're paying for it. Get you somebody like Maynard. Now, he's not much to look at, but he's tough. Look at what his wife loves him, so there must be something good about it. And his guy will stick to it. He'll get it done. Yeah.
One more question.
I am so annoyed with this situation. I have been for a long time. And I call my representative and he either lie to me or give me some fluffy blow-off answer. I'm to the point that not only do I want to stop these refugees, but I want to start deporting.
That's what Trump wants to do, and that's why I'm voting for Trump. He said send them back. It suits me.
I think you also heard Mike Huckabee give the answer that you gave just a moment ago, is put them in camps that they can be looked after and repatriated into their own
That's
community.
interesting, because they asked these refugee resettlement contractors if they would agree to doing that. And down to the last man, they opposed that program. So you're used to these refugee contractors paid for resettling them over here. They don't want to put the money back overseas. They want to keep it in their own pocket. They're trying to protect their income stream. That's all this is about.
Mary?
Oh, I was also going to say we need to not fund ISIS, which is also why they're supposedly being refugees. It's part of that.
Model.
I mean, we need to stop that funding as well.
That's too complicated for me. I don't understand that one.
But an alternative answer to this gentleman's agricultural solution of mandating insurance, mandating higher minimum wages, I think that's the tyrannical answer. I would prefer ending all welfare. If they're coming over here to get a job and work in agriculture in our poultry plants because we Americans are too good for that type of job, then let them work. They need a job, let the people pay them. If they're here for welfare, they go home because we cut off the welfare. That's my solution.
This is costing you $54,000 a year per refugee. $54,000 for the parent, mother, another $54,000 for the father, and $54,000 for each child, not counting local schools at $7,500 per child, and not counting the free college education they get with the program. That's what it's costing you.
One more question.
$20 billion a year.
And I'm saying cut it all off.
Yeah.
This is kind of like a warfare. When you really bottom out, it's like warfare against the United States because they're inundating and weighing us down so much. Economically, we can't afford it. So
It's crushing us. It's crushing us.
But what I wanted to ask you-
And killing the wages, killing the middle class, killing your ability to pay for it.
What I wanted to ask you though is if we refuse to take federal government assistance in this state, any federal monies, would we be able to resist this better?
I can't answer. I can't
Well, I
answer
mean,
that.
don't they make us, put us into a bind where we have to accept some of their
Well,
laws and
I can't answer that. But as to refugee resettlement, we could take a lot less money and we wouldn't have near the problem that we've got in Georgia. Keep in mind, there are 100,000 of these people just in the Clarkson area and surrounding area from Clarkson.
But they get paid in 90 days, they get a salary, or is it sort of pro bono or something that they?
See, the refugee itself, they get cash assistance for 36 months. They're paid for 36 months, okay? And then they get medical care, paid medical care for 36 months. Then they get to pick among about 4 or 5 different programs they can join.
But I mean, the chicken plant is paying them.
Yeah, the chicken plant pays them about $8, $9 an hour for 90 days. And after that, the contractors could care less what happens to them. They don't even know where they live. The governor of Louisiana is trying to find the Syrians. He can't find them.
If they change their names and go to a different
Well,
state, do it again.
they're not required to keep up with them. It's on the fact sheet I gave you.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it very much.